All right, we have another video here. 649,000 retail workers quit in April, largest 1 month exodus ever recorded. So before we get into that, if you want to follow me or help support me, I have a subscribe star I'm going to plug here. I'll plug it at the end as well in case you forget if you watch it all the way through. Just support. I'm trying to get this all on. I'm basically putting this on YouTube, Facebook, Minds, Gab, BitChute, just trying to get the information out to as many sites as I can. So let's get into this. This comes from like Gainesville, Florida. This article came out on the 21st. Retail workers are quitting at record rates for higher paying work. That's according to U.S. Labor Department. Some 649,000 retail workers put in their notice, the industry's largest 1 month exodus since the Labor Department began tracking such data more than 20 years ago. Many who are drained from the pandemic and empowered by a strengthening job market are leaving jobs like never before. It doesn't get into it a whole bunch, but there's like the issue with the unemployment as well, because I think with unemployment and like the added benefits and stuff they were giving, I think someone had figured it out. They were making like, if you make like 16 an hour and you work like a 40-hour week, you're making the same as someone like on unemployment with all the added like bonuses and stuff. So people weren't like leaving that to go, work at fast food for less. But there's also the issue, like I've seen, because on like TikTok and stuff and like Twitter, there's like all these like leftists and stuff like, well, maybe they should value their workers. I'm like, no, it's like entry-level jobs and like fast food jobs. You're not supposed to make a career out of that unless you go into like management or something for those, or become like a franchisee's owner at like a McDonald's or something. Like you working there in like high school or like through college or something. It's like supposed to be like a seasonal or like a part-time job, or while you go to school. You're not supposed to like build a career being like an entry-level worker. So there's like people that are like on the unemployment and they're refusing to go back to work, and it's causing huge demands and stuff. Like certain like restaurants and all this stuff, they aren't getting the amount of staffing they need, so they're having to close. So you had like these like leftists like cheering for this stuff, saying they're going to have to pay us more. But what's actually happened is like places like McDonald's are like, we'll just like automate all this stuff. There's like automated like I guess there's one drive-through where you don't even like talk to anybody. You just like kind of plug the stuff on like a tablet, and they have all that. Because there was a Taco Bell I went to where they had a guy there, and I tried to order from the guy before, and he's like, But they had like a tablet there where I can like plug in, and I know exactly what it is, and the order will get correct. They still need, for the most part, people back there cooking the order, although I have seen some automated robots that like precisely like cook the orders down to the second the way they're supposed to be. So ordering is getting automated in these fast food places. Cooking may soon become automated. They don't seem to understand the fact that like they only have like a set, like if they start, we'll get into it with Chipotle too, because Chipotle raised their minimum wage to 15, and they've had to increase the prices like of all the food on the menu to like cover the cost. Then if it gets to a certain price, like people are going to like stop buying it, so they become like not profitable. And if they're not profitable, they're eventually going to close, and everybody in that situation is going to lose out. So we'll get into all that. Some are finding less stressful positions at insurance agencies, marijuana dispensaries, banks, and local governments, where their customer service skills are rewarded with higher wages and better benefits. Like, I'm all for people getting better jobs and getting paid more. But people like want to be a Starbucks barista making like $60,000 a year, which, unless you're like a manager, I don't see that happening. Because there's like this whole, I don't want to say it's just like Gen Z. I mean, it's millennial too, and it is in every generation. There's like a group of like these entitled people that like either want to do like little to no work, and they feel like they should be making as much as somebody who works, 40, 50, 60 hours a week at like a skilled labor job or something. They like, I don't know if it's the way they were raised or they're like in a bubble their entire life, but they have like this like entitlement mindset which comes into a whole other issue too. Like if you have certain people like that are raised on like Section 8 and welfare and food stamps their entire life, and they're essentially given everything like growing up, which I'm not against that in short terms, but somebody shouldn't be on that 20, 30, 40 years. At some point you have to like cut them loose and like, hey, you need to fend for yourself, unless they're like disabled or something like that. But if you're like able-bodied, you shouldn't be on that for any extended period of time. But people that are on that, then they become entitled. Then they get mad that all of a sudden they have to work now. But that's a whole other thing. Labor professors and economists say the pandemic also made it harder for the nation's 15 million retail workers to find reliable childcare and public transportation. So the childcare thing is an issue, especially with the schools that were forced to be closed. And that just get into the financial things with the inflation and stuff too. There's certain people that are theorizing that like around the August, September time frame, like schools will be like actually opening back up like in person, and children will be able to go there. Then like maybe parents that had like no childcare options before will be able to like start picking up some work or something like that. But now that life is returning to normal, analysts say workers have begun to realize they have options, capitalizing on the latest waves of hiring and government stimulus. Companies of all sizes, meanwhile, are offering a host of perks, from free appetizers to subsidized college courses, to attract and keep workers. I think I saw there was one McDonald's maybe that was offering like $1,000 like sign-on bonus or something like that. Hiring now signs are cropping up on storefronts, big and small, as retailers scramble to fill openings. Many have raised wages or benefits to keep up. I have like an Indeed like a job thing set up, and I get emails daily about just certain job opportunity openings, and like certain like employers like trying to contact me because of mine, but they're not offering any more. Because they're like offering like what I'm making now, or maybe a little bit more at my current time. But in my current situation, in like the next 3 years, my pay is going to be like more. It's going to like more than double. So I'm like, unless somebody can like beat that, like I'm sticking where I'm at for now. Target, Best Buy, Under Armour, and K Jewelers all recently increased starting minimum wages to $15 an hour, while Amazon is offering sign-on bonuses to new employees. Overall, retailers had nearly 1 million job openings in April, more than twice as many as they did a year ago. Then we get into this too, where they kind of restate the same thing, but we're kind of getting into more like specific instances here. It was a real dismal time, and it made me realize this isn't worth it, said 23-year-old Ashlyn Potts of Tennessee, who left her $11 an hour job as an aquatic specialist at a national pet chain in April to focus on writing and art. My life isn't worth a dead-end job. Yes, I understand that, but like writing and art may not always or constantly pay the bills. So you need like a stable paycheck unless you have like a ton of cash sitting in reserves. In interviews with more than a dozen retail workers who recently left their jobs, nearly all said the pandemic introduced new strains to already challenging work, longer hours, understaffed stores, unruly customers, and even pay cuts, which is kind of interesting too, because people were like almost incentivized to not work during this whole pandemic thing, while people that are working were like making less, which is interesting. Christina Knowles spent much of the pandemic working the closing shift at a dollar store, sometimes 9 consecutive days without a break. For $10.25 an hour, she felt isolated, anxious, and demoralized. Now, my background is like I was in the military, so I've done deployment, so I've done like weeks or whatever without like any days off, so to speak. So I mean, I guess for most people, 9 consecutive days sounds bad, but there are people that work like weeks on end without breaks. Because I know there's some people, was it oil riggers, they do like, is it like 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off or something like that? But I don't know. Last month, a 34-year-old from Concord, North Carolina, quit leaving the industry she's worked in for most of her adult life. Now she works from home for a local law firm, a job that 3 days in still seems too good to be true. Like I said, I'm all for people getting better jobs and better pay if they can and they're actually able to do it. Not just like some weird fantasy that they think they should be doing it. There's a part of me that feels like this must be all a dream. Noel said, there were a lot of things I liked about retail. I loved talking to people and helping them, but the pandemic made me realize it was untenable. Labor professors and economists, keep in mind this is the Washington Post, labor professors and economists say the pandemic also made it harder for the nation's 15 million retail workers to find reliable childcare and public transportation. But now that life is returning to normal, analysts say workers have begun to realize that they have options, capitalizing on the latest waves of hiring and government stimulus as catalysts for career changes. Yeah, because I mean, there was, within the last year, 12 months, there was what? The initial 1,400, then I think there was another 1,400, then there was like a 600, right? So it was like $3,400 of quote-unquote free money, which is caused, it was like 2008, like, I think in 2008, like, certain businesses and banks should have failed. I know they said they were too big to fail, but you need to, like, burn the bush from the economy. If not, because 2008, where they tried to, like, save banks and stuff, like, it may be coming again around now, and it's going to make everything worse because they didn't fix what needs to be fixed. They didn't, like, essentially cut the cancer out of society and business, and now it's like back and worse. Companies of all sizes, meanwhile, are offering a host of perks, from free appetizers to subsidized college courses to attract and keep workers. I mean, previously there was already, I'm pretty sure Starbucks paid a certain amount for college. I want to say like FedEx and UPS and certain companies would pay for college to attract, employees to work there. We're seeing a wider understanding that these were never good jobs and they were never livable jobs. Well, if you want to like pull out, I hate that they use like a livable wage. Like they need to pay a livable wage. Well, if you look at the worldwide view, a livable wage is like $2 a day. Like what, 3 billion people I think in the globe live on like $2 a day. So that's your livable wage. But they're complaining, like, because it's this thing too, like, people in poverty today in America are living better than like kings of countries did, what, 150, 200 years ago. They got TVs. A lot of them are fat and overweight where they eat so much or they eat so terrible. They got AC and all this stuff. In many cases, the pay is below a living wage and the hours are inconsistent and insufficient. If anything, the pandemic has made retail jobs even less sustainable than they were already. Because I worked at a grocery store for a number of years. Like, working there was like okay, but if you wanted to build a career or build a family doing that, you needed to be like a department head or a manager or something like that, not just like an hourly worker. It is too soon to tell, she said, whether the latest exodus reflects a long-term shift away from retail work. Well, here's the thing, too. It sucks because in, like, the 90s under Bill Clinton, like, NAFTA happened. And, like, a lot of our factories and manufacturing got, like, shipped out to, like, Mexico or China. And so it left, like, a bigger portion of Americans, like, work in the service industry. Like, like retail and all this other stuff. I mean, what needs to happen and what was starting to happen under Trump, but it seems like it's getting decimated under Biden, is like manufacturing needs to be brought back to the U.S. and people can have manufacturing jobs that pay good, have good benefits, all that stuff, and you can like build up and bolster the middle class again. Because like the blue collar work of that was directly tied to the growing middle class, because they want to say that like the middle class is shrinking and there's becoming like rich or getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. But when you have like kind of jobs that are like less sustainable for a family, then you have that happening. Noel says she began mulling a career change around after five colleagues tested positive for the coronavirus late last year. Her lucky break, she said, came on a particular busy night when the checkout line snaked to the back of the store. A customer in line who was charmed by her upbeat nature and impressed that not a single customer left despite the wait encouraged her to apply for an opening at her law firm. Knowles applied in April and a few weeks later was offered a job as an intake specialist earning $13 an hour plus benefits. Which that seems like, well, I'm kind of curious what she was making before that $13 an hour plus benefits was good. With much of the country easing pandemic-era restrictions, service establishments like restaurants, gyms, and salons are offering better pay and benefits to rebuild the staffs that got gutted during the crisis. Sectors like real estate, professional services, banking, and insurance are also hiring, often at higher wages than retail, where median hourly pay for store employees hovers around $13. In anticipation of renewed demand, according to Julia Pollock, a labor economist for the site ZipRecruiter. There's the thing, too. I've seen some waitresses talking about this. This is like before COVID and stuff. Like, they were like, people are asking, like, why don't you, because technically where you're at is like your minimum wage is like $2.75 plus tips and stuff. But if you don't make enough tips, then you get the actual minimum wage. And I remember one girl saying, like, she's like, why would I do that? With tips, I'm making like $50 an hour. Like, she was making like 50, she was averaging like $50 an hour, like working as a server at a restaurant. Granted, I think she might have been working at like a higher end restaurant, but I mean, $50 an hour. I mean, you could work part-time, $50 an hour, and that still seems great. In a tight labor market, we often see big shifts among workers with low earnings. She said, if you're making $12 an hour and there's a job down the street offering $12.50, why not jump? There's no reason not to. That seems weird. Would you really, unless you didn't like that job and that other job sounds appealing, would you really change everything for 50 cents an hour? If you work 40 hours a week, that's like an extra $20 a week. I don't know. Hiring now signs are cropping up on storefronts big and small as retailers scramble to fill openings. Many have raised wages or benefits to try to keep up. Target, Best Buy, Under Armour, and Kay Jewelers all recently increased starting minimum wage to $50 an hour, while Amazon is offering sign-on bonuses as high as $1,000 to new employees. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Overall, retailers had nearly 1 million job openings in April, more than twice as many as they did a year ago. But I think they also had like dismal hiring as well. I think they only hired, it was like 266,000 or 226,000. Millions of retail workers were let go unknowingly, permanently early on in the pandemic as dozens of retailers tumbled into bankruptcy, shuttered locations, and sometimes liquidated thousands of stores. The result was a bifurcated industry with booming business at supermarkets, pharmacies, and hardware stores, while spending on clothes and other non-essential items tanked. Now that spending patterns are evening out again, retailers are having to hire accordingly to meet demand, this is kind of an interesting thing too, because this only happened in like, things were shut down because of like Democratic governors and like Democratic mayors. If you lived out in the, say, suburbs or country or in like a red area, like a lot of that didn't happen to you. It's just like the Democrats like over, like they did, like Cuomo, Blasio, Gretchen, Newsom, what's the guy in New Jersey? I can't remember his name, but like they did too much essentially and force people like out of jobs. There's other places like maybe during the initial 2 weeks they may like close down or something like that, but a lot of the places like out away from like major cities were like fine. Some labor experts, though, say retailers are not going far enough in addressing structural problems in the industry. Retailers, they say, should be focusing more on stable schedules, safer working conditions, and benefits like paid sick leave and vacation time. During the pandemic, They said many employees are also forced to take on new responsibilities, often without proper protections or adequate health care coverage to protect them from illness. And though customers were mindful of safety restrictions early on, workers say they quickly faded, leaving them vulnerable to verbal and sometimes physical altercations for overall social distance. Yeah, this mask thing. Because they were like trying to force people to do mask stuff when there's nothing that showed that masks did anything. That Fauci said that masks didn't work. Then you try to say that, well, Fauci was saying that masks didn't work because he was wanting the healthcare workers to have more masks. And he's saying you need to get masks. And you're like, oh, now you need a double mask and maybe even triple mask. But that was, yeah. All that's like back and forth flip-flopping. Chris Overland, who sold electronics at a national chain in San Antonio, took a $4 an hour pay cut during the pandemic before finally deciding to quit last month. The 25-year-old quickly found work in construction. To begin paid $10 an hour in the middle of a nationwide crisis, it just left a sour taste, Overland said. Now I'm doing more physical labor, but it's better pay, and I'm having a lot more fun without these stresses of retail. It feels better. Yeah, a lot of like construction and warehouse and, it's like plumbing, electrician, welding, all that stuff. They pay good. And like a lot of them, HVAC, a lot of them you can like get certified within like a year or 2 years at like a technical college or community college. And you can be out the gate making, I don't know if you'd start at it, but you'd be making like 50 or 60K a year within a few years. Jesse Rumpka quit his job at a liquor store last month to become a firefighter for the Oregon Department of Forestry. The 29-year-old, who has a degree in geography and environmental studies, took on retail work in March when most other industries weren't hiring. But as the pandemic wore on, he felt increasingly anxious about getting sick during shifts, sometimes double or triple masking. When he found out in early May that he hadn't been informed when a close colleague tested positive for the virus, he quit on the spot. I kept working because I had to pay bills, but it was never going to be a long-term job, he said. Some workers say the pandemic made their jobs logistically difficult, if not near impossible to continue. Bo Bell, who is deaf and relies on reading body language and lip movements to communicate, left his position as a manager at a Lowe's store in Bennington, Illinois at the beginning of the pandemic once the mask requirement made it tough to understand customers. He dipped into his retirement savings and got an associate's degree. Now, after a 35-year career in retail, he's embarking on a new one with the facilities maintenance job for Kohler. He's taken a 30% pay cut and will be working nights, but says he's hopeful he's moving into a growing field with ample room to advance without the mental fatigue of working in customer-facing jobs. I'm making career change at 56, so I know how this works, he said. I start at the bottom and work my way back up. Here's the thing, too, with more and more people, and the pandemic was kind of like forcing this and pushing this, too. More and more people like not going to physical stores and ordering from like online and getting stuff shipped to them through, say, like Amazon or like Walmart. It was like ordering. You can like order Walmart, Target online. There's going to be like less. There's going to be less. It's going to be less people working in the actual physical stores and their warehouses. They're going to get bolstered and grow more to have almost the where you have more people buying online and getting it like shipped directly to them. So this one is June 17th. Target raises minimum wage to $15 per hour with $200 bonus for frontline workers. Target will be raising its starting wage for all of its employees to $15 per hour beginning July 5th. According to a press release, this increase is more than 25% higher than the U.S. industry average. The company's last starting wage increase was in June 2019 to $13 an hour. The company also announced a one-time recognition bonus of $200 for its frontline store and distribution center hourly workers for their efforts during the coronavirus pandemic. In the best of times, our team brings incredible energy and empathy to our work, and in harder times, they bring those qualities plus extraordinary resilience and agility to keep Target on the front line, on the forefront of meeting the changing needs of our guests and our business business year after year, said Brian Cornell, chairman and CEO of Target Corporation. Everything we inspire to do and to be as a company builds on the central role our team members play in our strategy, their dedication to our purpose, and the connection they create with our guests and communities. Target is also offering free access to virtual doctor visits for all of its team members, regardless of whether they're on the company's healthcare plan. This offer will be valid through the end of the year. There's also another thing. This is like May 13th. It's saying Amazon is seeking to hire people, give like $100 bonus if you already have the COVID vaccine. They're saying they're trying to get it up to 17 an hour. Or it's saying new hires will make 17 an hour. This was they were trying to like bolster their. They were trying to get more employees because their Prime Day was coming up, which is it happened like a week or two ago. The Prime Day did, and they were. Amazon said it was also offering a separate $1,000 sign-on bonus to attract new workers in many parts of the country. Then they go on to talk about McDonald's here. They had an issue with this too because I guess 95% of McDonald's are owned by franchisees and not actual McDonald's itself. And McDonald's itself and their stores were going to pay $15 an hour by the end of June. But they were encouraging their franchisees owners to also do the same, but depending on whether they're able to or not, they haven't. And there's a big issue with that as well. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's if people are getting better jobs for more money, that's good. But a lot of other stuff that I've seen are people like feeling entitled that they should like make a lot of money doing an easy job. But like I said, if you're on YouTube, you can like, subscribe. Facebook, you can like and follow. Mine's like and subscribe. BitChute, I think it's like and subscribe on there. Also, if you want to support me, I have my subscribe star here that I'll put in there. Now I was talking about Teespring, but I have to like set up the designs with Teesprings, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, let me know what you think. All right, later.